Good evening, everyone. Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. My name is Alpa Sharma, and today we're going to start off with our new series, the weekly editorial roundup. I hope I'm clearly visible and audible to everyone. Can you guys hear and see me clearly? If you could quickly confirm that. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I hope I'm clearly visible and audible to everybody. Quickly confirm. Yes. So, all right. So we're going to start off with our series where I'm going to see you every Wednesday, where I'll be talking about the week that passed by. I'll be taking up some editorials from different articles, different newspapers, different journals, and we'll be discussing them. And the purpose would be that the way we discuss these editorials, we try to aid our understanding of verbal abilities so that when we sit for these MB entrance examinations, it becomes easy for us to understand the comprehension and various other kinds of questions that you see in verbal ability. So that's going to be our target while we go on with the session. Now, since it's my very first interaction with you, let me explain what my strategy is, what my plan is, that I'm going to follow with you every Wednesday that I see you. Yes. Good evening. So, every time when I see you at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, I'll be taking up 2 articles, okay? Which would be from various editorials. It could be from the Hindu, the Guardian, the New York Times, the Indian Express, the Aeon. I would choose them specifically. I would choose them according to their relevance, where questions can be framed. And out of the 2 articles, at least 1 article that I take would have questions. I'm going to ask you questions. So, for example, I would sometimes ask you the main idea question, para-completion question, inference question. So, 1 article I would ask you questions, and through questions, we would aim at understanding how precisely am I supposed to read an article so that if something of that sort comes in the examination, I am able to grasp it properly, I'm able to solve it properly. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing from these 2 articles. And 1 article, I'll be explaining it to you. So while I explain it to you, I would want you to take cues from the lines that I focus on, the parts that I infer, and those cues would be helpful to you while you read editorials on your own. So that's going to be our agenda. Apart from discussing the 2 articles and some questions that we solve, I'll be taking out vocabulary. So we'll be doing vocabulary every week. And next week, I would give you some homework. What the homework would be, that would be a surprise. I'm going to keep that for the end. I'll tell you that later on. So we would be taking up vocabulary. We would be doing that every week. We would discuss the tone of the author and the summary of each article in depth. Why would we do that? Because once we do these 2 things, we know exactly that our understanding of the articles that we are taking is going to be apt. We know that we've understood the article in detail. We know that our inference would be closer. If not absolutely, it would be closer to the correct answer. So we're going to be discussing the tone of the author and the summary and some inference questions as well. And sometimes on and off, I will be bringing you some tests from the previous week questions that we would be trying to revise. These words that I bring out would be out of the articles that I'll be discussing so that our understanding is perfect while we do these. So that's our idea of the session. That's exactly what we're going to be doing every week. So if we start off with our vocabulary that I've bought from today's articles. The articles that I bought today, I'm going to keep that a surprise. Where have I picked the articles from? Let's keep that as a surprise. We'll see that later on. कहाँ से लिया है, कौन से articles हैं? We'll see that later on. But let's quickly start off with the vocabulary that we have today. So the first word, this is the first slide. I would want you to go on with me, and I would want you to suggest some synonyms and antonyms if you can think of for these words that I've bought for the articles that we're going to discuss. The first word that we have today is annihilation. So annihilation is completely wipe out something, completely destruction, destroy, obliteration is a synonym to the word. So completely wiping it out, complete destruction, ruining anything. For example, a tsunami would obliterate everything, complete annihilation. That is destruction or obliteration or annihilation or wiping it out. So the threat of global annihilation, possibly the world coming to an end, is what the sentence is referring to here. Global annihilation, the entire world being destroyed or coming to an end. That is the first word here. Can you suggest some synonyms here, everyone? Can you come up with some synonyms apart from obliteration or destruction? Any synonyms to it? Feel free to comment that in the chat box. Let's look at the next word, hustling. So hustle is you have a lot of things to do. You are jostling with it. You are just pushing through, pushing yourself through it. So maybe multiple things to do or maybe multiple people around you and you just have to pass through it with a little bit of difficulty is hustle. Many things to do, many things around you, many people around you. That's hustle. So they were hissed and hustled as they went in, maybe pushed through something. Jostling, managing many things, pushing through something is hustle. That's the second word that we see from today's article. The third word that we see, raising the hackles. Now, this is an idiom. There's a contextual meaning always that we see while we do idioms. So let's first have a look at the word hackles. Hackles are usually those tiny hair at the back of the neck. Okay, so when a person is frightened or anxious or upset, what would happen? The hackles, the tiny hair at the back of the neck, they would be erect, right? They would rise or maybe be pointy. That is literally what rising the hackles is. But what is the contextual meaning that we have? So in a situation where a person is very anxious or upset or unhappy or jittery, in that situation, we could use the idiom raising hackles. The court ruling is sure to raise some hackles. Maybe people get upset or maybe people get anxious about it. So that's raising hackles. Let's look at the fourth word, trickery, deceiving someone, fooling somebody to do something for you or making a fool out of somebody so that you extort money out of them. That deceiving is trickery. The dealer resorted to trickery. Maybe he wanted to fool somebody, so he used a trick as an act of deception. Deception क्या होता है? Deception होता है जब कोई आपको when somebody tries to fool you, ठीक है? So उस act को हम deception या trickery बोलते हैं. That is trickery. The last word from the slide is paradigm. Paradigm is a typical example used to explain something. Typical example क्या होता है? For example, when I say women should behave in a specific manner, they should stay back at home, they shouldn't work, they should wear a specific kind of outfit. What we see is that in our culture, it's a typical example of a household of a woman that we see people telling us. A typical example. When we discuss physics maybe, or maybe motion, or when we discuss friction, we usually, as teachers, used to take an example of a ball rolling. कि ball को throw करोगे, when it rolls, थोड़े time के बाद it stops moving. यही example लिया था ना school में teachers ने. So, a typical example to explain anything or to suggest anything is a paradigm. So, paradigm is the last word for the slide. I would expect you to take a screenshot of this very, very quickly. Done, everyone? Let's move on to the next page. That's the first page. Next time when I see you next Wednesday, I'll be bringing questions out of the vocabulary words so that we could revise that. So I'll be giving you multiple choice questions. And of course, you know, working on vocabulary will obviously make your reading comprehension better, your verbal ability better. Even if there's no direct question that comes in CAT, it is necessary to be able to comprehend comprehensions well. That's the first slide. The second slide, I've got two slides today. So this second slide is systemic. Systemic is related, but not a synonym to systematic. They're two different words. Understand the difference here, everyone. Systemic. Before I move on, could you mark your attendance? How many of you are present here? Could you say a hi quickly? How many of you are present right now? Could you say a hi very quickly? Let me see how many of you are here. Let me talk to you a little, everyone. You say hi very quickly. Let me see how many of you are listening to me. How many of you are able to understand this? Say hi very quickly. Yes, I need to know that I'm clearly visible and audible to everyone. All right. So systemic is a word that's related to systematic, but not a synonym. Systematic is that goes with a proper methodology, whereas systemic is a word that's related to a system. Anything that relates to a system is systemic. So the disease is localized rather than systemic. That is, it doesn't relate to a system. There's no system that the disease follows. It's rather localized. It depends on the local areas. That's the use of systemic. Right? Hi Amatya. Do you understand the words? Good to go? आ रहा है समझ में? I hope you've taken a screenshot. Don't miss out on them, okay? Because in the next class when I see you, I'll be asking you questions on them. Prosaic. Prosaic has a connotation with literature. Let's understand how prosaic is used. So, if I say something directly, I say, okay, this person does not work. And rather than saying it simply that this person does not work, I say, oh, this person works a lot. He just keeps sitting looking at the computer. What I'm trying to say is that he does not work. But rather than saying it outrightly, rather than saying it plainly, I use it in a different manner. When I say it outrightly, plainly, unromantically, something that's usual or cliched, so cliched, usual, regular, these are prosaic. When you use some figure of speech like alliteration or maybe personification or maybe sarcasm or pun, you go opposite to a prosaic method. So prosaic is a term that's very frequently used with literature because literature doesn't usually use plain language. It uses something that's twisted. Prosaic is commonplace, cliched, overused, seen everywhere. That's prosaic. So, the masses were too preoccupied by prosaic day-to-day concerns. That means commonplace. रोज की regular चीजें दिख रही थी उनको और उसी में वो occupied थे. Is prosaic. Next one, sobering. The sobering is serious. Okay, we say when a person is high on alcohol, he isn't sober. That means he is not in his own senses, he is not sensible. Sober is being in your own senses, being sensible, being in a very sensitive and thoughtful mood. Not very angry, not very sad, not high on any kind of stuff. That's sobering. So a sobering thought lingered in the mind, a very sensible thought lingered in the mind. Okay? Sensible thought. Hona is sobering. Second last word for the slide, clutter. Many things chaotically arranged. Not rather arranged, not at all arranged. Chaotically, बहुत सारी चीजें इधर उधर, untidiness is clutter. So when a child plays in a room, he would clutter everything around. He would make the room untidy. That untidiness is cluttering. The room was cluttered with brick and brack. It was all over the floor. It was cluttered, it was chaotic, it was untidy. That's cluttered. And the last word for the slide, embody. Can I break the word? Let's see body. So anything that has a body, we can use the word to embody that. So, for example, the national team that embodies competitive spirit. That means this is directly related to the national team. You can see this visibly in the national team. It's visible as if it has a body. That is embodied. It's visible as if it's in a tangible form. दिख रहा है आपको. So, competitive spirit or skill, आपको दिख रहा है national team में. You can see that. Although competitive spirit की कोई body नहीं है, but जब हम उसको synonymous मान लेते किसी और चीज के साथ, that is to embody. Slide number 2. जल्दी से screenshot ले लो सब लोग. Screenshot ले लिया? Send me a thumbs up. Got that everyone? All right. And let's quickly have a look at the last slide, last 3 words that we're going to be discussing in the editorial articles today. Puerile, infantile, immature, childish, not childlike, but childish. They're different words, okay? So childish, bachkana, like kids do it, right? So immature, not mature enough is puerile. Infantile is another synonym to it. He was laughing at his puerile argument, silly argument. So silly could be a synonym to it, yes? Could it be? Ridula? Silly ho sakta hai iska synonym? Yes, absolutely. Silly, immature, childish, puerile. Repository, very commonly used, a place where you store things. Repository in the computers, in the labs, any place where you store things. So the metadata will be aggregated in a repository, it would be stored there. Place where you store things, usually data would be a repository. And the last one, this word is very important. I'll have a question on this. Okay, understand this. When you deliberately put fire on something, not by accident, but deliberately doing it. आग लगा देना deliberately किसी चीज को is arson. So when you are liable for that, you would be treated for arson in the court, right? So the police are treating the fire as arson. This fire was not by chance. It was arson. Somebody had deliberately put fire to something. जानबूझ के आग लगाई थी उसको. That's arson. So last slide. I hope screenshot ले लिया है सबने. Arson बहुत important word है आज. We're going to look at its implication in the. Okay. First article that we have today. Now onwards, every time I see you, I'll repeat that. I'll bring 2 articles. One article would be with questions. Questions would be like synonym questions, inference questions, synonym questions, para completion questions, because we know in CAT, these questions are very frequently seen. So I'll give you options. And then I would have inference question again and the main idea question again. This becomes one of the most important questions because when I expect you to read an editorial daily, I would want you to work on this question. So I'll be bringing questions like this, and the other article would be without questions, where I explain how to read those articles, and I'll carefully handpick these articles. बहुत ध्यान से चूज करके लेके आऊंगी वो आर्टिकल जो मेरे अकॉर्डिंग आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग को एड करेगा. That will help you understand things better. So that's the first article that I have today is from The Guardian. Hi Brijesh. तो पहला आर्टिकल डिस्कस करेंगे ब्रिजेश. That's the first article that we have today. Guardian से है, ठीक है. First page I will explain it to you, but second page पे there's a question. वो आप आंसर करें. ध्यान से look at my explanation. At any moment I'll be explaining that in English, but at any moment if you think you want me to reiterate anything in Hindi, I'll be more than happy to do that. Let's understand this one. Okay. So IPCC report. You know what this report is? Have you read about this in the newspapers? Did you read the IPCC report? पढ़ा था आप लोगों ने? Let me see if you know about that. Did you see the IPCC report? Do you know what that is? नहीं पता? Explain करूं IPCC report? Yes, no? Quickly confirm that. पढ़ा कि नहीं पढ़ा? Did you read that or not? बताइए बच्चे, बताना जरूरी है. Yes, exactly, Brijesh. Yes. The Intergovernmental Panel. For other people जिनको नहीं पता है, I'll quickly reiterate that. So, in the world, there's a group of scientists. So that's called the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. You're right, Brijesh. Let me highlight this. So, this is the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. और वो एक report लेके आए. ठीक है? This article is directly linked to the Glasgow meet, the COP26 meet. अगर आपको वो नहीं पता, it's okay. आपको अभी इतना पता करना जरूरी है that there is a report that this panel gave us, and the report is actually a warning, a huge warning to us that if we don't work on our greenhouse emission, on our carbon emission, then the world is going to end very, very soon. This article gives views on the IPCC report. So if you don't know what the IPCC report is, Yes, exactly, Amatya. You're right. So this is the report that tells us that the world is about to end if you don't work on your greenhouse emission. I hope आपको greenhouse emission पता होगा क्या है. When there's a lot of carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere that creates holes in the ozone layer and multiple other impacts. I'll not talk about that today. So let's quickly read the page because the next page has an inference question that you are going to answer. Okay, careful. So what are the chances of humanity avoiding a full-scale disaster? Full-scale disaster, that means possibly the entire community or civilization coming to an end. What are the chances of something like this happening? क्या ऐसा हो सकता है? Given that history suggests civilization collapse has been mostly a norm rather than an exception. इसका मतलब we've seen that happening in the past. देखा है कि civilizations खत्म हुई हैं. Civilization in itself, they've collapsed. We've seen that in our country. Mohenjo-daro, for example, they collapsed. What are the chances of something like this happening again? That's the question put up by the author. The answer, according to the UN IPCC report, is that the odds of annihilation are lower than previously imagined. The chances are not really high कि वापस ऐसा कुछ होगा. But the scientists are clear that not enough is being done to control the climate disaster. We aren't doing enough. If you remember the COP26 meet that happened in Glasgow, do you remember our country had given a a target for itself? 2070 तक हमारे country का net zero emission हो जाएगा. We would reach a net zero emission. Remember that? 2070, and by 2050, 50% of our energy consumption, India, 50% of our energy consumption would move on to renewable sources. But then the scientists say, no, you're not doing enough. The IPCC suggests that about 40% of human race is living in danger zone and that many ecosystems are being irretrievably degraded. Irretrievably degraded means it's done, it's dusted, and you can't revive them. इतने सारे ecosystems हैं. For example, रेन फॉरेस्ट हमने इतना डैमेज किया रेन फॉरेस्ट को that it's actually very difficult for us to come back. It's irretrievably degraded now. So the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was forthright in describing abdication of leadership by world powers as criminals. So the UN Secretary has said these nations, these leaders of world powers are criminals. You have to tell me a synonym of abdication. Is it notice, circular, order, or resignation? Read the sentence. Try to infer that contextually. What would be a synonym to abdication? Contextually, try to figure it out if you don't know the meaning of the word. Sentence पढ़ो, context से निकालो क्या meaning होगा. Synonym to abdication. Anyone? Rajesh, Amatya, Mridula, Abhishek. Synonym to abdication, notice, circular, order, resignation. Give it a try. Nobody? Resignation. Absolutely, Brijesh, you're absolutely right. It's resignation. I'll teach you that word. Ab means away. Like absconding, abduction, abdication, abnegation. Ab means away. So you move away from your responsibility. You say, oh, I'm resigning. I'm not going to do this. And the author says, जब लोग ये जो world powers हैं ये अपनी responsibility से दूर चले जाते हैं ना आप criminal होते हो. When you move away from your responsibility of saving the world, you are a criminal. The world's biggest polluter, he said, are guilty of arson to our only home. World's biggest polluters, who are these? The developed nations. They have developed themselves. Their GDP is really high, but they are responsible for putting fire to our only home, that is Earth. Read this question. Answer what could be inferred from the previous page. Read that again, everyone. Achha, let me tell you one more thing. If page ko bhi padho, I'll give you 1 minute. Read this page as well, the previous and this one, and then answer what could be inferred. I'll give you 1 minute. I'll stay quiet. Go ahead and do that. Give it a try. Read the whole page. Send me a done when you're done with your answer. Give it a try, even if it is wrong. TK Brijesh, good try. Others? There are so many people. Why don't you give it a try? Try karo, even if it is wrong, I'm here to correct you. Because if you don't try, I would not know if you get it or not. Okay, Brijesh, if I give you options like all of the above or a combination of A, B, and C, will you choose anything else, Amatya? Will you choose anything else? Then if I give you a choice like A, B, and C, all of the above, none of the above, then what would you choose? Brijesh, Amatya, what would you choose then? Okay, let me explain this to you. Let me explain this. So, let's keep this answer pending. Let's do this paragraph and then I'll come back to it. Okay. So, no amount of global health heating is safe. Of course, because the heat grows up, there are going to be many impacts. The ice sheets would melt, the glaciers would melt, the sea level would rise, many things. So, no amount of heating actually is safe. If the world's average temperature rise by 1.5 degrees, the goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, ये 1.5 degrees से ज़्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए. That's the target. That's the maximum. So even if there's a fraction of increment in that, it would be devastating. And at 3 degrees, it's not an outlandish rise. Almost a third of life on terra firma could be gone. Terra firma is our Earth. So if there's a 3-degree rise in the temperature, almost 1/3 of the civilization or life on Earth will be dead. That's scary it is. So this report is the final warning. Next time when we have a warning, it would be by the end of the decade when it will be too late for us to stop. So right now we need to realize this. That is why it remains essential to stick to the UN targets of cutting global greenhouse emission by 45%. Now see, look at this data. He says we need to reduce our greenhouse emission by 45%. Whereas right now the greenhouse emission is increasing by 14%. So we are far away from reaching the target of reduction of 45% because we are on a track of increasing it by 14%. This data tells us that D certainly is correct. Instead of reduction, the world is on a path of increasing net zero emission. This data, we can easily infer D out of it. Okay, so Mridula says A and B. But Mridula, did you get D? Yes? D is absolutely right, Brijesh. Bilkul correct from the data that's there in the end. Let's look at A. The promises made by the countries are ostentatious. Ostentatious is pretentious. दिखावा, लेकिन reality में कुछ नहीं. Okay, only for showing. So when it says India's target for net zero emission 2070, and there was a previous line in the previous page that said countries aren't actually doing anything because they've promised many things in the net zero emission. China का 2050 का target है net zero emission का. But ये सब सिर्फ दिखावे के लिए, because you aren't doing anything. Because had you been doing anything, there would not have been any increase. So A is also correct. Almost half of the world is in a susceptible position due to climate change. The previous page gave us a data of 40%. That means almost half of the world is in a position that it could be wiped out. if the same increase in the temperature continues. C says this prediction is not something new to mankind. When you look at the first sentence says extinction of civilization, collapsing of civilization. We've seen that in the past. Can it happen again? It could. It is not something new for us. We saw that in the past. I gave you the example of Mohenjo-daro, Harappan culture. The entire civilization collapsed. So, this prediction is not something new to mankind. We have seen that. The answer would be all of the above. All could be inferred. Do you understand that, everyone? All could be inferred. Now, I hope it gives you an insight into how you're supposed to read any article, what lines you need to focus on, and how you read between the lines. Reading between the lines क्या होता है? एक लाइन लिखा हुआ है, इसका क्या alternative meaning हो सकता है? क्या hidden meaning हो सकता है? What is a hidden idea that could be inferred, not directly written, but a hidden one? You have to learn to do that. That's exactly how questions would be framed. You would never get direct questions. None of the factual ones. That's how you read. Okay? What's the synonym to outlandish? Anyone? Synonym to outlandish. Before I move on to the next page. Synonym to outlandish. What's the synonym, everyone? To outlandish? It's okay, Brijesh. आपको धीरे धीरे ना आइडिया लग जाएगा कि मैम कैसे क्वेश्चन बनाएगी, मैम कहाँ से पूछेगी. That's the whole idea, that you know exactly मुझे पढ़ना क्या है, what line do I need to focus on. Unusual. Yeah, exactly, Mridula, you're right. It's unusual. Absolutely right. Also, guys, see, today it's my first class with you. I'm explaining so many things, but gradually I'll stop doing that. Okay, I'll be bringing you questions and I'll ask you to read it on your own. And I'll see if you can gauge the meaning hidden here or not. I'll gradually stop doing this explanation. Right? That's the whole idea. Completion. Now, this basically, this is where a next paragraph comes. One line that can come before it, before this line. This is the first line of the paragraph. The second line is written. You have to identify what could be the missing line here out of the options A, B, C, and D. What could be this first line of the paragraph? This is the second line. Let me see if you can get this. Good luck. Let me see if you can get this. I'll help you find out the answer, but give it a try. Your answer. There are two very close options. Very close. Anybody, what's your answer? Difficult? ट्यूशन तो आता है कैट में, ना जरूरी है, ट्राई करो. सी और डी में कंफ्यूज्ड हो? ओके, कोई बात नहीं, I'll help you. Others? Rajesh, Amatya, what's your choice? C or D? You know what the answer is? You know what the answer is? I'll tell you what the answer is. The answer is A, my children. A. Let me explain this to you. I'll explain that in Hindi and English both. Understand what I'm trying to say here. No, it's A. देखो कैसे ढूंढते हैं आंसर. The idea of a gentle transition away from fossil fuels towards low carbon alternative no longer seems realistic. मतलब that people want to move away from non-renewable energy to renewable energy is actually not a very realistic one. Probably it's a fake idea. Probably people aren't doing many things to move away from non-renewable to renewable energy. Okay? I'll repeat that in Hindi. ये जो लोग बोलते हैं कि हम फॉसिल फ्यूल्स से रिन्यूएबल सोर्सेस पे जा रहे हैं, सोलर पे जा रहे हैं, ये सिर्फ एक अनरियलिस्टिक आइडिया है, ऐसा हो नहीं रहा है. ठीक है? Whatever I mark here has to go well with this line. Agreed? Option D says it is important to appreciate that the world is moving to renewable source of energy. The positive sentence hai, whereas the next sentence was negative. Here you say people are moving to renewable energy. In the next sentence you say people are not moving to renewable energy. Will they go well together? Do you think so? No. They will not go well together. But that, these are two opposite meaning sentences. You have to continue the idea here. Okay? B says the Ukraine crisis, it has nothing to do with this paragraph. Absolutely nothing. Where does the Ukraine crisis come from? Absolutely unrelatable. I could have discussed the Ukraine crisis and its impact to the nature in possibly some other paragraph, but certainly not in this paragraph. Easily eliminated. Okay? Now let's try to choose between A and C. These were the two very close options. Now see, C is actually a reiteration, a repetition of what is written here, whereas A is new data. So A says past inaction and the failure to begin significant emission reductions early have cost the world dearly. मतलब हमने past में अपना emission reduce नहीं किया और आज हम सफर कर रहे हैं. उसी के साथ हम ट्रांजिशन भी नहीं कर रहे हैं तो और खराब हो गई सिचुएशन. अगेन इन इंग्लिश, we haven't done a lot of things to reduce the emission in the past. Plus, we aren't even moving away from fossil fuels to low carbon alternatives. It's even worse. It's a new idea that is continued here. If I have to choose between new idea that is continued and a reiterated line, I would always choose a new idea that's continued. A reiterated one. Why will an author repeat something that he has already written? Not a mark of a good author. He would not do that. The answer is A does. Got that everyone? Why is the answer A? ठीक है? आया समझ में कैसे हुआ A? ठीक है? चलिए. So the idea of gentle transition away from fossil fuels is a fake idea. A catastrophic event such as the Arctic permafrost disappearing completely or Amazon rainforest turning into a savanna. Basically, these would be impacts of high carbon emission. Rainforest would be suffering, permafrost would be disappearing, the sea level would increase. All of this is an impact of the CO2, high CO2 emission. That's a repetition idea here. Okay. Now, this page, I'm going to explain that to you. But in the next page, I have an inference question and a main idea question. I'll explain this quickly to you before I move on to the inference question. Please be very careful. The inference question stems out of this page only. Alright? So, the world must now take emergency action to rapidly reduce atmospheric carbon. Abhi tak complaining tha that you haven't done anything, you should be doing. And now it's a suggestion that you need to take action right away. And you have to take on the arsonists of the fossil fuel industry. Who are these arsonists? These people who put fire to the fossil fuel and thus generate so much CO2 that it will impact our greenhouse emission and our nature ultimately. So, We have to work on that. A speedy transition to renewable energy is required. Yes, we have to move to the renewable energy, but we can't see that happening. Unfortunately, that's not visible. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not about hydrocarbons, but has many implications of their use. Now comes Russia and Ukraine. I hope you know what's happening between them. I hope you're reading the newspapers regularly because along with your reading comprehensions, it would aid you with your WAT, interviews, GDPI, whatever is asked in your respective examination. Interview is an inevitable part. You have to sit for that. You should be aware of what's happening around the world. So it says Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not actually about hydrocarbons, but we can see its impact on hydrocarbons, on the nature. Moscow has used its gas supply as a sword for Damocles over it for major customers. The EU ought to reduce its reliance on gas as a matter of energy scrutiny, security, and to stave off planetary destruction. So it talks about the EU, it talks about Moscow, it talks about Russia and Ukraine and how their fight is actually going to impact our climate indirectly. So the Ukraine crisis is showing that the governments will spend vast sums of money to address a threat deemed serious enough. पता है क्या बोल रहे हैं? तो कह रहे इतना पैसा लगा दिया तुमने वॉर में, वो पैसा अगर तुम क्लाइमेट चेंज पे लगाते तो सोचो क्या हो जाता. So much of money is put to wars. Why don't you put this effing money to save the climate? Is humanity not more important than having your own egos high? It is a pity that a similar sum could not be found over a decade to help vulnerable nations deal with climate crisis. What can be inferred out of the options here? Mark your answers in the chat. I don't think I'll be able to take 2 articles. Nonetheless, I'll gradually increase my speed and we go ahead. What do you think can be inferred? What's the answer, everyone? Easy, very easy. I explained it right away. What should the answer be? Super easy. Before I reveal the answer here, I would want you to do a few things. Rahul says, Raghul says A, okay? All right. Before I reveal the answer, I would want you to do a few things. I would want you to share this video because if you think it's effective, if you think you're able to understand things, I would want you to share this video. I would want you to like this video and I would want you to comment if you want these classes to continue, right? I would want you to do that. That would help me a lot. Do you think these are effective ones? The answer is not A, Rahul. No, it's not. Yes, Amatya. Got that. The answer is C. The answer is C. War is terrible for the world. Is the passage talking about the impact of war and how people are dying, or is it talking about the impact on the climate? It's not about the war. War is indirectly linked to climate here. And they say so much money was put to wars. Why did you not put the money to climate and controlling the greenhouse emission and protecting the climate? If this money was available with developed nations, you should be diverting the money to save your world. The only place, the only home that you have, that is where the money should be directed. The answer is C. It was written in the previous line. Yes? C. Does. Now comes the main question. Tricky one. Trickiest of all, rather. Give this a try, everyone. Every time I have an article with you, I would want you to answer this question. Rather, every time you read any editorial article, I would want you to at least think of this. Try solving it. क्या हो सकता आंसर यहाँ out of these options? देखो कितना समझ में आया आर्टिकल, लेट मी सी. Oh, also, by the way, those who do not know me, my name is Alpa Sharma, and I've been teaching verbal ability for the last 12 years. And verbal ability, critical reasoning, whatever you call it, I've been teaching that for the last 12 years. I shall be coming live every Wednesday, 8 p.m. What's your answer here? Rajesh, Mithila, Amatya, Ragul, Abhishek, what's your answer? D. Others? I'm waiting for your answers. Give it a try, everyone. A. Others? Okay, Brijesh, I'll give you a little suggestion today. When you mark the main idea, the summary, the gist, the theme, all of these mean the same thing. Okay? Never choose a generic option. Generic means what? Brijesh, सोचो क्या ये सेम ऑप्शन मैं किसी और पैसेज में भी लगा सकती हूँ जहां वॉर्स हो रहे हैं, लड़ाइयां हो रही हैं, बॉर्डर को लेके लड़ाइयां हो रही हैं, वहां भी तो ये लगा सकती हूँ ना ऑप्शन. हाउ डू आई नो आई एम रेफरिंग टू क्लाइमेट चेंज स्पेसिफिकली हियर? नहीं पता ना. Since we don't know if I'm referring to specifically climate change, this cannot be my answer. If my option does not talk about climate change, it will not be my main idea. My main idea would be exactly what, not a generic one, but exactly the one that is discussed in the passage. D is a generic one. I'll eliminate that. Developed nations are arsonists, that's right, but it's only a part of the premise in the passage, not your main argument. ये सिर्फ एक्सप्लेनेशन का पार्ट है कि कैसे डेवलप्ड नेशंस ने फॉसिल फ्यूल्स यूज करके इंक्रीज कर दिया है ग्रीन हाउस एमिशन, बट द आइडिया इज दैट वी नीड टू सेव आवर वर्ल्ड, आवर अर्थ. ठीक है, बट इज द पैसेज अबाउट वॉर? इट इजंट. It's only a part of the premise. The idea is that now we need to work on reduction on the dependency of fossil fuel and we need to work on climate change. इसी को सजेस्ट करने के लिए उसने वॉर की बात करी, डेवलप्ड नेशंस की बात करी, हमारे अर्थ को सेव करने की बात करी. The answer is A. Okay? A is the correct answer, my children. That's A. So now, since it's my first class, let's keep it simple. I've taken one article today, though I had bought another one, a very funny one. But I don't think I should be taking that today. But I'll give you a little bit of homework. Can you write down the tone of the passage I had explained to you under my video in the comment section? I'll be checking each of the comments. Okay? And I'll reply to you if your tone is the correct one or not. What was the tone of the author? Summary question I have already solved with you. Write down the tone of the passage. Let's start doing that. Next week when I see you, I'll bring 2 articles. I hope you've loved this session, but before I move on with another thing, if you're targeting CAT 22, our new batch 5 has been launched where Vikas sir, Salojan sir will be teaching you. And I'm sure you don't have to look any further because you've got a set of already turned toppers who've turned into mentors. So look no further, jaldi se enroll kar lo and study under the guidance of toppers who've turned into mentors. Please like, comment under my video, the tone of the author, that's your homework. Share the session and subscribe to the channel. And you could follow us on BYJU'S Exam Prep Instagram, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and our app and Telegram as well. I shall see you again next Wednesday. Thank you so much, everyone. And make sure you comment under my video and do the homework. Have a very good night, everybody. All of you.